Welcome again, everyone. Protests against the war in Gaza have continued to spread from Columbia and Yale to other U.S. universities as officials scramble to defuse demonstrations. Police made several arrests as they moved to break up a protest at New York University on Monday. Dozens of students were arrested at Yale earlier in the day, while Columbia cancelled in-person classes. Similar protests have sprung up at Berkeley, MIT, and other top colleges across the country. In the U.S., students of different persuasions say there has been a rise in both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents since Hamas' October 7th attack on Israel.
Plaza now, or you will be arrested for trespass.
Meanwhile, Columbia University faces a seventh day of tense solidarity protests. Pro-Israeli and Palestinian ceasefire demonstrations are continuing in front of a closed university despite crackdown by the police. The university has turned to hybrid classes amid the turmoil.
Yesterday I was at Columbia in the encampment when the announcement came in that the university decided to make classes online. And I think it's a real testament to the fact that what the students are doing, that the pressure they're putting on these institutions is working. The universities are scared. They're scared because they're going to lose money. And I think the students are showing that they can fight back against these big institutions and that we'll win.
Every single one of these college and university presidents who refuse to take action should immediately resign in disgrace, and if they don't resign, their asses should be thrown out. I have never seen a more disgraceful act than what we are seeing on college campuses right now.
Meanwhile, the United States says it's working continuously to bring the fighting between Israel and Hamas to an end. Addressing the press conference in Washington, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Israel's actions in Gaza have raised troubling human rights concern. Mr. Blinken also reiterated the U.S. efforts in ensuring that all hostages held by Hamas are released.
Hamas's horrific attacks on Israel on October 7th last year and the devastating loss of civilian life in Gaza as Israel exercises its right to ensure that those attacks never happen again have also raised deeply troubling human rights concerns. We continue to work every day to bring the fighting to an end, to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas and other groups, to uphold international humanitarian law, to prevent further suffering, to create a path toward a more peaceful and secure future for Israelis and Palestinians alike. Do we have a double standard? The answer is no. As this report makes clear, in general, as we're looking at human rights and the condition of human rights around the world, we apply the same standard to everyone. And that doesn't change whether the country in question is an adversary, a competitor, a friend, or an ally.
Mr. Secretary, is the Geneva Convention apply to Gaza? Reporters have been...
Meanwhile, health experts in the United Nations are warning that the ongoing conflict in Gaza could potentially lead to the emergence of mental health issues among residents in the years to come. The healthcare system in Gaza is on the brink of collapse as access to the medical facilities and supplies is limited due to constant shelling in the enclave. Gaza's health ministry says at least 34,183 Palestinians have been killed and over 77,000 others injured since the October 7th attack.
I know the long-term trauma that the people of Gaza, its children, will carry with them because of enduring intergenerational physical and mental health impacts of racism, structural discrimination, violence, and imperialism. Just days into the war on Gaza, the medical infrastructure was irreparably damaged. Healthcare providers were working on a dire situation with limited access to medical supplies under conditions that did not allow them to provide timely and quality healthcare. They themselves as healthcare workers under bombardment in the enclave. I bear witness as the very practice of medicine is under attack, and this has been a war on the right to health from the beginning, as well as underlying determinants of health. The health system in Gaza has been completely obliterated, and the right to health has been decimated at every level. The conditions are incompatible with the realization of everyone to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health. The attacks, the harassment, the killings of many of my own colleagues, the healthcare workers, the destructions of health facilities, and the destruction of humanitarian aid organizations continue to catapult to proportions yet to be fully quantified, if at all possible. Not only is Israel killing and causing irreparable harm against Palestinian civilians with its bombardments and their allies, they are also knowingly and intentionally imposing famine, prolonged malnutrition, and dehydration. I remain concerned at the ongoing risks of water and airborne diseases, lack of medical and surgical supplies and commodities, and the lack of sexual and reproductive health and mental services. The right to health has been in the spotlight, from my perspective, in a way that we've never seen before.
10 crew members have been killed after 2 Malaysian Navy helicopters collided mid-air. The helicopters were flying in formation as part of a rehearsal for a military parade. One aircraft clipped the rotor of the other before the two crashed into the ground. The incident took place at about 9:30 a.m. local time in Limut, 282 kilometers from the capital Kuala Lumpur and home to a Royal Malaysian Navy base. The Prime Minister of Malaysia, Anwar Ibrahim, described the incident as a heart-wrenching tragedy. He also confirmed that the Royal Malaysian Navy is forming a committee to investigate the cause of the incident. And the United Nations Security Council has held a roundtable meeting on the security situation in Haiti. Members at the UN are discussing ways to assist the Caribbean nation re-establish and enhance its security. Haiti has witnessed an upsurge in violence, with gang leaders carrying out attacks on government infrastructure, as well as looting educational and health facilities in recent weeks.
Today, it pains me to note that all speeches and callings have not avoided that some of the worst scenarios for Haiti have become realities in recent months and weeks. In early March, gangs mounted coordinated attacks impacting key state infrastructure, including multiple police stations and 2 of the main prisons in Port-au-Prince, as well as educational and health facilities and religious sites. Just last week, the medical school of the Université d'Haïti was attacked and looted. Gangs have been constantly launching attacks against the presidential palace, which resulted in fierce confrontations with the Haitian National Police, leading to multiple casualties. Since 3 March, gang confrontations around the international airport in Port-au-Prince forced all commercial airlines to halt services, a situation that continues to this day.
Families continue to be displaced by the violence, and we estimate that more than 180,000 children are now internally displaced. Armed groups have also strangled major transport routes from Port-au-Prince to the rest of the country, destroying livelihoods and restricting access to services. And as the armed groups gain more territory, neighborhoods are setting up barricades and self-defense teams to defend against the violence. The result is that hundreds of thousands of children and their families in besieged communities are largely cut off from humanitarian aid and essential services.
And a quick check on the weather now. China has evacuated more than 100,000 people as heavy rainfall continues to lash the southern province of Guangdong. The flooding has left 4 people killed and another 10 reported missing. Authorities raised the level of alarm to the highest as the storms showed no sign of abating. Torrential rains have been swelling rivers in Guangdong, prompting state media to warn of the risk of floods at a level seen around once a century. The floods have also damaged houses and bridges, with at least 25,000 people in emergency shelters. And 5 people, including a child, have lost their lives while attempting to cross the English Channel in a small boat. A 7-year-old girl, a woman, and 3 men were reported dead despite resuscitation attempts. Authorities say more than 40 people were rescued from the boat, which was carrying over 100 people. This incident comes after the UK Parliament finally passed a controversial bill to send asylum seekers to Rwanda, a move the Kigali government has welcomed. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says the tragic incident in the Channel underscores the need for the Rwanda plan. All along, Kigali maintained it was committed to the deal despite the controversy it generated in the UK and says it's prepared to accept the asylum seekers. The spokesperson for the authorities, Yolande Makolo, said Rwanda is pleased that the bill had been passed and that the country is working hard over the last 30 years to make the country safe and secure for Rwandans and non-nationals. Rwanda has taken steps to address the human rights concerns of the UK Supreme Court and prepared facilities for the asylum seekers. But it's not yet clear what volume of migrants it'll be able to accommodate in the coming months. Well, efforts needed to step up the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals is the focus of the ongoing 10th session of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. By the end of the first quarter of 2024, member states and their partners were already past midway in the implementation of the 2030 agenda, yet progress on most SDGs is off track, with experts saying it's either moving much too slowly or has regressed below the 2015 baseline. Listing 4 areas where Africa has potential to achieve success, United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed urged international partners to give the continent the required assistance that will remove the barriers on its path. She was addressing delegates at the opening session.
It has always been said that we don't bring enough clarity to the agenda, that we take everything and that the agenda is too ambitious. But it cannot be ambitious for a continent that has this much potential in terms of its human resource, over 70% of our youth. Allow me to highlight 4 areas in particular. First, inclusive and sustainable energy, which powers sustainable development. And let me say here, with a just transition. For a just transition requires resources. We cannot be expected to see African economies transition to a green, sustainable energy without the investments that are required. African countries are making tangible progress in securing access to sustainable energy. Access to electricity rose by nearly 10% in the last 6 years. But Africa is also home to 60% of the world's most coveted solar resources. But the continent only attracted 2% of global investments in renewable energy over the last 2 decades. This underinvestment means a continent with the potential to be a renewable energy superpower, lagging with just 1% of installed solar capacity. We are also home to a significant proportion of the minerals critical to the global renewals revolution, an immense potential source of wealth. Second, sustainable food systems. After a long period of improvement, hunger has worsened substantially in Africa. Around 280 million people undernourished, an increase of 57 million people since COVID-19 pandemic. 42 African countries have developed national pathways to implement the UN vision under the Food System Summit, and a recent call to action resulting from the Food System Stocktake #2. The third, digital connectivity. Countries in this region are emerging as trailblazers for innovation and booming tech industries, yet the divide between and within African countries remains significant. While internet access and mobile penetration gaps are persisting between poor and those that are more well off, rural and urban areas, male and female users, more must be done to scale up investments in technology and digital infrastructure to bridge this divide. National digital strategies in Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Rwanda are great examples of how we can shape investment pathways at scale across the region. The fourth issue is in education. No country can harness the opportunities provided by food, energy, and digital transitions unless they invest in more quality, relevant, and future-oriented education systems. At the heart of this, like so much else, is finance. Now is the time to rethink austerity-oriented international policies, reduce debt servicing costs, and ensure a more equitable global taxation system so that African countries can do what we know they want to do, to invest more more efficiently, more equitably, in capacities and the skills of their people.
Bilateral relations now. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has visited Iraq, making it his first trip to the country in over a dozen years. Mr. Erdogan was received by Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani at the Baghdad International Airport. According to the Iraqi Prime Minister's office, both leaders held a meeting and oversaw the signing of a preliminary agreement for joint cooperation on the development road projects between Turkey, Iraq, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Mr. Erdogan says the strategic framework agreement on security, energy, and economic cooperation would serve as a strong roadmap and a significant turning point in the diplomatic history of both countries. Meanwhile, the Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi has met with Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif for diplomatic talks in Islamabad. The visit comes as the two neighbors sought to mend bilateral relations. The meeting's agenda focuses on strengthening Tehran-Islamabad ties and expanding trade, energy, and agricultural cooperation between the two states. Both leaders announced plans to increase trade between the countries to $10 billion a year. The leaders' meeting is part of President Raisi's three-day trip to the country, during which he reportedly plans to visit other major cities. Nigeria's eagerness to do business with countries all over the world is helping to deepen its partnership with European countries, especially Belgium and Luxembourg, which will be hosting a business forum in September this year. Speaking at a cocktail event to raise awareness about the event in Lagos, Deputy Head of Mission at the Embassy of the Kingdom of Belgium, Veronique Bernard, says the eagerness to do business has been noticed by the Kingdom of Belgium, which is why it has partnered with the country over the years in various areas, including provision of vaccines for Nigerians during the pandemic, the cleanup of the Niger Delta, and various trade missions between Nigeria and Belgium. Speaking on advantages of the forum, Secretary General of the Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture for the Belgium, Luxembourg, Africa, Caribbean, Pacific, NPO, known as CBL-ACP for short, Thomas de Broiler, and consultant of Nigeria-Belgium, Luxembourg Forum, Collins Weke, said that the upcoming event will open Nigerian companies to business opportunities in Brussels and, by virtue, the European Union.
You look at the advantages for the Nigerian companies, I would say, is to get introduced to the Luxembourg and the Belgian economy, and really to get connected to Luxembourg and Belgian companies. So the main focus of our business forum is to connect. We are focusing on the B2B, B2G meetings because we really want the Nigerian companies to come with us to Belgium in September and get results. We want them to get business. So when they go back to Nigeria, they can be an ambassador of Belgium, can be an ambassador of Luxembourg.
There is obviously very much growing interest by Nigerian businesses that want to, partner with Belgian businesses and vice versa. In terms of Belgian businesses that are seeing the opportunities in Nigeria, they know that Nigeria is not a perfect country. There are challenges, but they also see within those challenges quite a lot of opportunities and are ready and willing and able to engage. And so what the Business Forum is doing is actually organizing the table, getting both sides together, doing matchmaking, but at the same time, giving opportunities for business to government, some kind of collaborations. So you have the business to business, B2B, but also B2G, which is a business to government.
And we have consultant to the forum, Collins Weke, joining us now in the studio. Collins, it's great to see you. We're used to having you join us from Brussels, talking foreign affairs, but now you can talk both foreign affairs and, of course, business. And we're also welcoming to the studio for the first time someone he works closely with, Thomas de Boiler. That's the Secretary General of the Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Agriculture for the Belgium, Luxembourg, Africa, Caribbean, Pacific MPO. That's quite a mouthful.
Yes, thank you.
I wonder how you say that all the time. Gentlemen, pleasure having you on the program today. So, Thomas, I must ask you first things first. What sector, of Nigeria's business environment is this forum targeting?
Yes, and first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here the first time. Well, looking at the different sectors, we are definitely looking at agriculture, we are looking at healthcare. The deputy of the ambassador also mentioned it. I think we have a lot of Belgian companies that are active in the healthcare sector on Nigeria. We also have cooperation with the Ministry of Health here in Nigeria with different Belgian companies. And then we are having ICT. We are looking also at real estate. So really, it's a variety of different sectors. Also, we cannot ignore oil and gas. It's still a very active sector here in Nigeria. But we want to focus on a big scope of different sectors that we believe Belgium and Luxembourg can create added value for the Nigerian economy.
And so what similarities do you see? You've been working with him and, working to get this on for a while. Some of those companies coming in for the first time, which areas do you think that they'll be interested in the first instance?
Yes. Well, I think some of the sectors that I mentioned, definitely, for me personally, I think the key sectors are healthcare, construction, ICT, because I see that for Belgian companies, they can do a lot in those sectors. And then we look at R&D, because Belgium is quite known for R&D development in these sectors. I think we mentioned also recently you have drones that would be going over the fields and they see if there's any diseases in those crops. You also have now machines that are actually destroying the weeds around the crops with lasers. So these are all innovative developments that create added value so that the company can focus on growth to generate more business.
Right, and Collins, as a consultant to the forum and a Nigerian, you know what needs to be done here to expand the nation's economy. You know what areas that businesses need to focus on, and what more needs to be done. So, extending what he has said, what do you think are our most immediate needs in Nigeria that the foreign investors can really key into, aside from the ones that he has mentioned?
Yeah. There is, thank you so very much for having me. I'm so pleased to be here live for the first time after many years, providing analysis, virtually. Essentially, the need for Nigerian businesses is more in the area of, support, because there is acute lack of capacity in a number of areas. I do know for certain that production activities are things that, Nigerian businesses value a lot, okay? Unfortunately, the capacity to produce, rather than just shipping away raw materials, those capacities are not here. Now, we are also proponents of a situation where productions are done here, even if it's halfway. Take, for instance, cocoa. I mean, this region, the Lagos, Ogun State, Ondo State, they are very much known for cocoa. Now, what we have had in the past is a situation where, the cocoa beans are simply shipped, across the borders, and, rather than using the opportunity to at least have processed them here before they are then, shipped in barges, So just to leave it at one example, I mean, Thomas talked about agriculture, there are quite a lot of initiatives that can come out of Belgium to help to increase, not only capacity, but also efficiency, okay? He's talked about drones with lasers that can actually help in weeding. So you don't quite need, the massive manpower to be able to be crawling, down everywhere and so on and so forth. So I just want to say that every single sector, that's in summary, every single sector that Nigerian businesses, are keen on actually developing further. Belgium had, gone through all of those developmental trajectory very long ago, and innovation is something Belgium is known for, and so they don't have to go through some of those, teething problems that the Belgian business people had gone through. So they can actually work together in transferring knowledge and skills, building capacity here in exchange for the finished products that could then go to service the Belgian economy.
And I hope this will come to bear in the next question I'm about to ask. What everyone now is going through, climate change, is a very big question. A lot of issues, a lot of discussions surrounding climate change. There have been meetings in Africa, meetings in Europe, meetings in America about climate change and what the so-called Western world should be doing to better protect Africa, so to speak, in that area, because Africa is bearing the brunt of what the so-called world powers are doing. So is this going to be like a huge discussion come September?
Well, huge discussions, I don't know. But the thing is, we are encouraging African businessmen and women to think in their own best interest, okay? In foreign relations, in business, the first thing is to think of your own best interest. That is not to discountenance the fact that it is now becoming, a very important practice in business to also think in the best interest of your partner, because that is where you then have sustainability. Now, the whole narrative about climate change, yes, we know it's a major issue, and the world should prepare, for it. What needs to be done now has to be done collectively. But that collectively doesn't mean that Africa has got to bear the brunt of adaptations that affect developments here in Africa. So what that means essentially is, for instance, oil and gas is still big here. I mean, it may be dying in, some parts of the world, but as a matter of fact, it supports a whole segment of the economy. And so the phasing out of oil has got to be graduated. It's got to be a gradual process as far as Africa is concerned. And so we are telling people, yes, if you are, dealing in oil and gas, get on with it. But we also know that there are viable alternatives. If you look at the figures coming out of, Bureau of Statistics here in Nigeria, you will observe that non-oil exports are much more. Nigeria has been emphasizing that, but they have now gone beyond just talking about it and putting some incentives down to actually encourage people. And we have seen the result in the figures. And so we are also encouraging people to think beyond oil and, engage in those non-oil products.
And Thomas, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think my thoughts are similar than my colleague Collins. And yes, I think, we are looking at many different sectors. And I think if you look at, of course, the European Union has the Green Deal, that is focusing on promoting green energy. And I think in Africa, mainly in the Southern African countries, you have a lot of focus on hydro power. You have seen that the European Union has also signed deals with these Southern African countries and so on. And we also believe that there is definitely a big future still for gas, because, with the geopolitical situation in Europe, the gas prices have skyrocketed. So I think there's definitely an opportunity there for Nigerian gas to be exported to the European Union. But of course, for that to happen, you need the right facilities at the ports, you need the right storages at the port, and then you need to get the traffic going, for these transactions and ships to be coming, picking up the gas going to Europe and so on. So I think there needs to be a cooperation on both sides to identify what are the focus areas? Well, definitely it's something we cannot ignore. I think it's a global effort that we have to do. But of course, as Colin said, it has to be taken into different steps. But I think it's good to already start looking at these green economies, gas, biogas, solar energy, and so on. Yeah.
And if I may just quickly add, I mean, we do know that the West are the biggest polluters, and there is absolutely nothing wrong in preaching the gospel of let the biggest polluters pay the biggest bill. And so, if they are serious about, migrating to clean energy, Africa should be supported in those, efforts by, pumping money here to support the businesses rather than, just harassing them as a matter of fact to give up their livelihood, just for the sake of clean energy.
Gentlemen, I must thank you for your time today on the program. First time in the studio here in Nigeria. Colin St. Thomas, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you so very much for
Thank you.
us. Yeah, cheers.
Let's move on. Insecurity in Africa is a major challenge, and Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu is seeking a continent-wide solution to the menace. In the light of this, President Tinubu is calling for the establishment of a regional counterterrorism center that will serve as a hub for intelligence sharing, operational coordination, and capacity building. President Tinubu canvassed this at the African high-level meeting on counterterrorism in Abuja, where he declared that Africa must take a comprehensive approach to combating terrorism. Our State House correspondent, Emperor Simon, reports.
Faced with the challenge of terrorism and other security threats, President Bola Tinubu is here to open the two-day African Counterterrorism Summit holding in the office of the National Security Advisor.
At this time, Your Excellency,
the high-level summit has in attendance Presidents Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana and Faure Gnassingbé of Togo, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Mrs. Amina Mohamed, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musa Faki, members of the diplomatic community in Nigeria, some state governors, and hundreds of other delegates from across Africa. For decades, Africa's existence has been threatened by activities of terrorist organizations, including the over 15 years reign of the Boko Haram and Islamic State West African province ISWAP in Nigeria and neighboring countries, which has claimed thousands of lives and rendering millions homeless. The National Security Advisor highlights the objectives of the summit to profile solutions to the myriad of security challenges in the country and strengthen regional collaborations among African countries.
The theme of this high-level African counter-terrorism meeting, strengthening regional cooperation and institution building to address the evolving threats of terrorism, is timely. It reflects the urgent need to confront the impacts of terrorism that continue to disrupt our lives and threaten our collective security.
He gives update on terrorists in detention.
I'm taking this opportunity to inform the world that we have resumed the prosecution of the Boko Haram and affiliated terrorist suspects detained in Kaindi and other locations across the country.
The general consensus is that the root causes of terrorism must be addressed for Africa to make a headway.
Rebuilding our social contract is essential for recovery. It means building strong democratic institutions and promoting people-centered governance, all grounded in human rights and guaranteed access to basic services and inclusive development for all people, no matter who they are or where they are.
However, for any action to be impactful, there has to be a deliberate investment in building the capacity of institutions.
We must harness the power of technology and innovation to enhance our counterterrorism capabilities, including surveillance, data analysis, and border security measures.
Those who think illegal money has
President Bola Tinubu repeats his earlier call for the establishment of a regional standby force and strengthen the existing counterterrorism centers across the region.
The international community has both the moral and legal obligation to help in this cause because it is outside money, not African money, that fuels the illegal operations. Key to our collective efforts against terrorism is the need for a fully operational regional counter-terrorism center. This center will serve as a hub for intelligence sharing, operational coordination, and capacity building throughout our region.
The president assures his guests of Nigeria's commitment towards strengthening arms control measures, border security, and disrupting the illicit trafficking networks that fuel terrorism and organized crime. From the Office of the National Security Advisor, Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
Security expert David Otto joins us for more now. Hi, David. In your assessment of the counterterrorism summit, do you think significant progress has been made?
I think these events are quite important to have. Of course, everything begins with an idea. Nigeria, for example, has been combating insurgency for decades. And of course, it does have the gravitas to come up with some kind of a regional counterterrorism center. I'm sure that this will be run perhaps under the Office of the National Security Advisor. But I think it's all about the implementation strategy. I mean, since 9/11, when Al-Qaeda struck the Twin Towers, there has been more than a million conferences being held regarding counterterrorism strategy. So I think the key point here is how is the implementation strategy, and how can each country develop its own strategy in order for them to be able to collaborate with other countries, especially when it comes to intelligence sharing. Beyond the rhetorics, we want to see some practice in terms of sharing those intelligence between nation states.
And I suppose we've asked these questions a million times before, and with the new trends now existing, how do you think the menace of terrorism and insecurity, how should it be combated in Africa in the present realities?
I think the way forward is that individual countries have to identify their threat dynamics. That means understanding the nature of the armed groups that operate within their states. And of course, they also have to understand the vulnerability assessments which exist, which terrorist groups do exploit. The simple methodology has been to deal with the triangle formula, which is, of course, first of all, to address the underlying socioeconomic drivers, those elements that drive people to join terrorist organizations. Then, of course, you've got to look at the role of law enforcement in terms of preventing terrorist groups from perhaps acquiring weapons or making IEDs, improvised explosive devices. Then, of course, in terms of having some coordination within maybe financial institutions, to prevent these groups from maybe raising funds, and that is where the international community would also come in at some point. I think the last bit is to prevent these groups from launching attacks. Recently, we've seen how non-state actors have been able to carry out attacks, including kidnapping, of mass, individuals, at mass, within schools, and in all sorts of manners. So these are some of the, I think what I call the triangle of approach, which needs to be adopted by each country, but also then, there would be some kind of a common approach, which other countries can copy from. But each country must look at its own dynamics, before you can have some kind of a coordination.
What role can the larger international community play in order to enhance a multilateral counterterrorism cooperation and reshape a collective responsive to the insecurity in Africa?
I think the international community always has a role. Terrorist organizations do operate beyond the countries where they carry out the attacks. For example, when it comes to funding, funding sometimes is not limited to local funding. Sometimes you have terrorist organizations which are funded from outside the country. So there is a role that international community has to play. When terrorists do launch attacks, they do not discriminate between who belongs to what nation. So I think the most important aspect is for local countries or national countries to develop a strategy that can accommodate the assistance of the international community. And the only way you can do that is to organize yourself and plan, have a strategy, and then you can bring in the international community to feed into that strategy. Because of course, terrorism, though it has international influence and international impact, crime still happens at a very local level. And this is where I think it's more or less like a bottom-up approach from local, national, regional, and then of course towards the international scene. This is how the approach should work in practice.
Right, David, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.
Governors of some northern states in Nigeria are seeking a collaboration with the United Nations to find solutions to the myriad challenges in their states. The governors of Katsina, Kaduna, Kebbi, Jigawa, Sokoto, Niger, Zamfara and Benue states met with the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed and her team at the Nigerian Embassy in Washington, D.C. to discuss avenues to getting solutions to the issues of insecurity, food security, education and other matters affecting critical sectors of the states.
This meeting is hosted by the Nigerian ambassador to the U.S., Uzoma Emenike, between governors of 8 states in the northern part of Nigeria and the United Nations delegation led by the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed to examine matters affecting the states and find workable solutions.
For us to achieve the Millennium Goals for SDG, we need to address the issue of insecurity because it's the key and fundamental. It affects food security, it affects lack of education or out of school children. It affects our health facilities and also our ability to even go to hospitals.
We need support, we need research, we need a lot of collaboration with UN, and these things are ways we can come out or transition out of this crisis. It's very, very important. So I don't want to bore, my colleagues are here, they want to talk, but I know there are a lot of things we have seen as root causes of where we are and how we can go out of this crisis.
Agricultural productivity is another area that has seen immense decline due to insecurity.
And that is now becoming a nightmare. We can't even get to the farms. Our fear is when we might just migrate into Zamfara. Nothing personal, my brother. Help us. Our people are ready to go back to farms, including young people, because Kebbi State just recently were able to purchase about 50,000 solar phones and CNG phones, just to make sure that our teenagers go back to farm.
The state governors are confident that with help from the United Nations, they will be able to tackle and resolve the problems plaguing their various states.
Earlier, my colleague Melinda Akilami spoke with the honorary advisor to the Zamfara State Governor, Professor Kabiru Mato, to address these challenges. He was speaking from Washington, D.C.
I think one of the essence of this meeting is to be able to bring to bear, to this global body on the intensity of the crisis and how uncomfortable, governance and administration seems to be in the northern part of this country. And I think the way to go about it, as the Secretary General has promised, is to be able to, articulate positions. The states, not just that are here, but several others in the northern other want to articulate the positions and the magnitude of the crisis with a view to identifying the various agencies of the United Nations that will be able to chip in a word or two and render one form of assistance or the other so that they help the states to be able to realize this. And, one of the critical areas is the energy. Energy, now that the Constitution of Nigeria has been amended, captive power formation is possible and several other things. The state and the private sector are now at liberty to generate sufficient power and electricity to be able to run the local economy, the small and medium scale enterprises, agriculture, and so on and so forth. So, I do believe very sincerely that, the meetings that are going on here provides ample opportunity for the United Nations to be able to link the respective states and the relevant institutions under it, as well as the private sector that may be interested in alternative sources of energy, so as first of all to be able to generate sufficient power to run the economy, small and medium scale enterprises, like I said, as well as the cottage and other form of agricultural industry. So this, in my view, it's a very important meeting, and so far, I'm not speaking on behalf of the Northern governors, but so far for the meetings that I have attended, I have seen that the response has been very positive. The UN and its agencies that are attending the meeting, and especially the United States Institute of Peace, trying to come up with new ways and means of addressing the issue of banditry, by the governors sharing their experiences and so on and so on. So I believe at the end of it, we're going to come up with, resolutions.
As Togo prepares for the legislative and regional elections on April 29th, a significant number of women are in the electoral race, defying traditional norms and expectations. According to figures from the Independent National Electoral Commission, 593 women are in the running for parliament and 438 women for the regional elections. Many have begun their campaign across the country, including Victoire Dogbe, the current Prime Minister of Togo and candidate of the UNIR party. At present, Togo has 17 women members of parliament out of 91 deputies, while at local level, they represent only 13.23% of the municipal councillors, with only 12 women mayors out of the 117 communes. And finally, on the program, colorful characters and creatures filled the sunny sky in the Chinese city of Weifang as thousands gather to witness the 41st Annual International Kite Festival. Known as the world capital of kites, Weifang is located in the Shandong province in eastern China. The region is also home to a kite museum showcasing more than some 2,000 exhibits from around the world, including kites from ancient China. Over 1,000 creative designs of kites were flown by participants from more than 30 countries and regions around the world at this year's event. That's our program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.